The most expensive item ever sold on eBay was a $160 million yacht. New Zealand has more sheep than people. Baby rattlesnakes are born without rattles. A snail would take about 220 hours to crawl 1 mile non-stop. The longest recorded flight of a chicken was 13 seconds. The ancient Greeks invented the myth of cyclops. But do you know how they originated? Ones in ancient Greece may have possibly found mammoth skulls. And mammoth skulls have a big hole in the front, that is the nasal cavity, but the Greek would often mistake it for an eye socket. So that's why they believed in giant cyclops, when in reality they were just finding mammoth and as well pygmy mammoth skulls. Animals that escaped extinction. There were only around 1,400 humpback whales back in the 60s, but due to efforts to save them, their numbers have now grown to 135,000 in 2025. There were only around 50 sea otters back in 1930, but 95 years later, there's now over 125,000. Bald eagle numbers dropped down to 410 back in 1963, but now in 2025, that number skyrocketed to 316,700. And finally, panda numbers doubled since 1975, with around 1,100 back then to 2,220 today. You can hear a blue whale's heartbeat from more than 2 miles away. About 700 grapes go into each bottle of wine. A group of bunnies is called a fluffle. The oldest living land animal is a tortoise named Jonathan, who turned 192 in 2024. He was born in 1832 and has lived on the island of St. Helena in the Atlantic Ocean since 1882. There's enough deadly toxin in one pufferfish to kill 30 people, and there's no antidote. Still, pufferfish is a highly priced delicacy in Japan, but can only be prepared by well-trained chefs. Extinct animals that were rediscovered. The tree lobster was a large insect, and was thought to die out in the 1930s. It wasn't until 2001 on Ball's Pyramid, a volcanic sea stack, is now considered the rarest insect in the world. The Wallace giant bee is the largest bee in the world, with a wingspan of 2.5 inches. The bee was originally discovered in 1858, but it was thought to be extinct until it was rediscovered in 1981, when 6 nests were found on the island of Bacon and other nearby islands. The takai, a beautiful goose-sized blue-green bird, was first discovered in 1847. It was thought extinct for a long time, until a man named Jeffrey Orbell, convinced that Takahi was still out there somewhere, mounted a rediscovery campaign and succeeded in finding the bird in the South Island of New Zealand in 1948. In 1807, Napoleon was once charged by a horde of rabbits. Rather than trapping wild hares, his men had brought tame rabbits from local farmers. As a result, the rabbits didn't see Napoleon as a fearsome hunter. They saw him as a waiter bringing out the day's food. Weird history facts you didn't know. In 1895, the entire state of Ohio had only 2 cars. Both cars managed to still collide with each other. Ancient Romans used to put sandals on the hands of sleeping people, then tickle their face so they would slap themselves. Charles Darwin and Abraham Lincoln were both born on the same day, February 12, 1809. Before toilet paper was invented, Americans used to use corn cobs. Did you know? Giraffes are 30 times more likely to get hit by lightning than people. A cloud weighs around 1,000,000 tons. There are human remains of 1 man on the moon. Wearing a tie can reduce blood flow to the brain by 7.5%. The world's oldest cat lived to be 38 years old. There's no such thing as a straight line. Zoom in close enough to anything, and you'll spot irregularities. Even a laser light beam is slightly curved. Have you ever wondered what happens every second? Wait 1 second. In the 1 second, 3 million emails have been sent, 9 new websites have been created, there have been 3 million Google searches, 166 rainforest trees have been cut down, 75 McDonald's hamburgers have been eaten, and over 10,000 Coca-Colas were consumed. And in the time you've watched this short, around 116 babies have been born. Cleopatra ruled Egypt closer in time to the invention of the iPhone than to the construction of the Great Pyramids of Giza. There are citizens of the 22nd century already among us. There are millions of people on Earth right now who will be there when the fireworks go off on the New Year's Eve 2099. A child born in 2023 will be in their 70s. Harriet the tortoise, who died in 2006, had seen Charles Darwin in person. George Washington died in 1799. The first dinosaur fossil was discovered in 1824. George Washington never knew the existence of dinosaurs. Today's oldest living tree, the bristlecone pine, was already around 1,000 years old when the last woolly mammoth died. Your watch is a compass. Let me explain. If you were lost in the wilderness with only your watch, you could figure out which way is north. In the northern hemisphere, you could point the hour hand to the sun. The halfway point between the hour hand and 12 o'clock is south, so the opposite side of that is north. In this example, the halfway mark for south is about 8 o'clock, making north 2 o'clock. If your house smells like fish for absolutely no reason, 9 times out of 10, it means there is an electrical fire. If you're ever buried in an avalanche, spit. Your saliva will follow the gravity, and you can simply dig the opposite way. If you ever for some reason ingest windshield wiper fluid or antifreeze, drink large amounts of vodka to keep it from shredding your kidneys to give you time to get to the hospital. No matter how thirsty you are, do not eat large amounts of snow. Too much cold ice in your stomach can cause you to die from hypothermia. Melt the ice and then drink it. Comets smell like rotten eggs. Facts you didn't know. Deaf people are known to use sign language in their sleep. You travel 2.5 million kilometers a day around the sun without realizing. Dogs tilt their heads when you speak to them to better pinpoint familiar words. The longest someone has been constipated was 45 days. Some insects have been known to fly higher than Mount Everest. The platypus sweats milk. Some of the weirdest animals you've never heard of. First is the pacu fish, which is known for its very human-like teeth. Next is the purple frog, which only spends 2 weeks annually above the surface of the ground. Next is the unusual sea pig, which spends its life over 1,000 feet deep in the ocean in search for organic particles in the mud. Next is the giant isopod, which is something I do not want to meet when swimming. Finally is the peacock tarantula, which is actually a pretty good looking spider. So these were... Napoleon was born in 1769, and he was a French military genius and influential statesman of the 19th century. He declared himself emperor in 1804, establishing the First French Empire, which lasted until 1814. The Louisiana Purchase in 1803 doubled the size of the US as France sold the territory. He embarked on the ill-fated Russian campaign in 1812, resulting in heavy losses of his army. Napoleon's final defeat came at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, leading to his exile on St. Helena. He died on St. Helena in 1821, and his remains were later brought to France. Did you know, in North Korea, you can only visit 28 websites? North Korea has their own basketball rules. Slam dunks are worth 3 points, 3-pointers are worth 4 points if it's nothing but net. 1 point is deducted if you miss a free throw. Any field goal made in the last 3 seconds is worth 8 points, and games can end in a tie. North Korea has banned blue jeans, for they are seen as a symbol of US influence. It is not 2023 in North Korea. It is 112, which is the amount of years since the country's founder's birth. Human poop is used for fertilizer. In 2008, South Korea stopped sending fertilizer to North Korea, so a new law was introduced and citizens have to send 220 pounds per year of their own poop and hand it over to the authorities. A day on Venus is longer than its year, taking 243 Earth days to rotate. Bananas are berries, while strawberries, raspberries, and blackberries are not classified as such. The shortest war in history lasted only 38 minutes between Britain and Zanzibar in 1896. Some sharks can glow in the dark due to the presence of special light-emitting organs. Honey never spoils. Archaeologists have found pots of honey in ancient Egyptian tombs still edible. The national animal of Scotland is the unicorn, which symbolizes purity, innocence, and power. A group of flamingos is called a flamboyance. Octopuses have 3 hearts. 2 pump blood to the gills, while the 3rd circulates it. If a service dog ever approaches you without its owner, follow them and do it quickly, because potentially you can save someone else's life. Try not to have your hands in your pocket while walking downstairs. If you have a fire in the kitchen, especially on the stove, don't throw liquid on it. Throw a lid over the pan to smother it, and take it off the heat. Ensure you turn off the stove. Many people panic when they see fire and leave it on. If you're driving down a dark highway, especially at high speeds, you must be very careful of deer and moose, so always check for glowing eyes. Woolly mammoths were alive when the pyramids were constructed. A population of woolly mammoths roamed Wrangel Island in the Arctic Ocean off Siberia, as recently as 3,700 years ago. Augustus Caesar was potentially the richest man in history, who had an estimated net worth of $4.6 trillion when counting for inflation. The tallest married couple ever recorded was Anna Haining Swan, who was 7'11", and Martin van Buren Bates, who was 7'9". When she gave birth, Swan's baby was 22 pounds. Fox tossing was once a popular sport. Alexander von Humboldt learned a language that had died 40 years earlier from a parrot who still spoke some words. Facts about the first moon landing that you did not know. First, did you know that the landing of Apollo 11 almost didn't make it? The fuel was running so low that the astronauts had only 20 seconds left before they would have to abort the landing and return to the orbiter. Second, when the astronauts left the moon, the flag that they put down almost got blown over during takeoff. Finally, Buzz Aldrin was the first person to relieve himself on the moon. he wore a special bag inside his spacesuit and dumped it outside. This man lost out on $100 billion. Ronald Wayne was one of the co-founders of Apple Inc., along with Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. He sold his 10% stake in the company for only $800 in the year 1976, just 2 weeks after he helped to establish the company. At that time, he was worried about the potential financial risk of being a part of the company and decided to sell his stake back to Jobs and Wozniak. However, in the years that followed, Apple became one of the most successful companies in the world, thanks to products like the iPhone and iPad. If Wayne had held on to his 10% stake, it would be worth over $100 billion today, based on the company's current market value. The dire wolf is back? Well, sort of. Scientists working on bringing back the mammoth, and who also recently made woolly mice, have used DNA from dire wolf fossils to genetically modify grey wolves to have traits of dire wolves. So while the real ones are still extinct, this is still a cool development.